In this video, I'm going to present a guide to the most common questions that are asked in payroll interviews, and I'm going to help you plan really great answers that will help you get a job working in payroll. So let's start with a question that comes up very commonly, which is what would you do if an employee reported that their pay was wrong? And this is, of course, something that does happen when working in payroll, and it's maybe obvious how to answer this, but actually to answer it well, you have to get in all of the ideas that they're looking for. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you're conveying in your answer is you don't know who's wrong yet. So you don't want to give the idea that you believe that the employee's wrong, because most often probably it is the case that the employee has misunderstood something. But you want to be conveying in your answer that you've got an open mind. It may have been that payroll made an error, someone else has made an error, or that the employee has misunderstood and you don't have enough information yet to decide which one of those it is. So how you answer this is important. You've got to get in lots of key ideas. I'm going to show you the step-by-step way to answer this to get in all the things that you need to convey. So the first thing is you want to say that you want to understand exactly what is wrong. You want to be taking notes when the employee is explaining it. You want to make sure that they've got their case across. They've obviously spotted something that they believe is a mistake, so you want to clearly record what they are saying to you so that you've got a clear record of it and you know how to figure out whether there is a real issue. The next thing you say is that you take the report seriously, that it is extremely important that payroll is correct. So when you receive a report, you don't just ignore it or assume that you're probably right. You actually take that report very seriously. And it's very important that you take this opportunity to reiterate, that means make clear, how important it is that pay is accurate. It's not acceptable to report incorrect numbers to the tax authorities. It's not acceptable for employees not to be paid their actual salary. It is essential that people are paid the correct amount and that everything is done correctly from a tax perspective as well. The next thing you make clear is you say that you'll follow the appropriate policy. Don't be tempted to talk about what you would do in your previous job or what your last company did. Make sure you're clear on the fact that you will follow the policies of your new company. Then you say that you'll communicate with the right people. You may have to report that to a more senior member of the payroll team. You may have to ask questions of the person that was responsible for processing that particular payslip. So you need to know who the right people to speak to are and to communicate appropriately. And then the next thing you say, just to finish off the answer, is that you ensure that any errors are completely fixed. And that is how you answer this question successfully. So let's move on to another question. How do you manage deadlines? And when you think about working in payroll, every single month or perhaps every single week, depending on how your payroll works, there is a major deadline. You don't want to say to employees, well, you're not going to get paid on the date that you always get paid because something went wrong in payroll. That's going to cause huge impact. People have rent to pay, mortgages to pay, expenses to pay, and they rely for their budgeting on receiving their salaries on specific dates. So it's not acceptable to fall behind deadlines. So they want to be confident that you are someone that can work to deadlines and you know how to do it. And to be basically clear, what they want to hear is that you're, very cool, calm, confident, and that you sound like you've got this. That when you're asked about how you manage deadlines, you know how to manage deadlines, and you are answering this really confidently. That gives them some idea that you're going to be someone that's going to excel at meeting your deadline. So let's look at the things that you have to get in this answer. You may have a feeling for answering this, but it's important that you do it in the right way, because in the interview, they're scoring you and they're looking for certain things in the answers. So like the previous questions, make sure you get in those ideas. So the first thing you say is that you have a clear organizational system. So describe the way that you manage your tasks. Do you have a checklist routine? Do you use a notepad? Do you use some sort of app? Is there some system that you've used in the past that you like to use for organization. And it may be that when you join the company, you use a different system, but you can use the same principles. The next thing you say is that all of your tasks are broken down into smaller parts. You don't just look at the big deadline of having everything finished for a certain date. You think about all the little things that you need to achieve in order to meet that bigger deadline. Then say this thing. You say you look at your short term, mid term, and long term planning. So you know exactly what you need to do today, what needs to be done by the end of the week, what needs to be done by the end of the month or in the next 2 weeks. So you have planning from starting the task to finishing the task and a clear idea of what needs to be happening when in order to meet that. So you've got 3 different ways of planning. Then you talk about prioritization, that in order to meet the deadline, some things that are less important may need to not be completed immediately because they're non-urgent, but that they can be picked up once this deadline has been met or once you're highly confident that the deadline will be met. And so you've got a system for prioritizing to make sure the important things are always done as a priority, obviously. Then you say you anticipate pinch points. So there may be certain times where you may be called away to do other things, or there may be competing deadlines that are going to make it harder to meet this deadline. So you're going to think ahead and you're going to go, well, these times are going to be really busy. How am I going to deal with that? How are these things going to interfere with meeting this deadline, and how do I manage that? And then lastly, and don't forget to do this, people get bogged down in describing how they meet the deadlines, but forget to actually say that they do meet deadlines. And that's what they really want to hear. And you want to say that you consistently deliver work to meet deadlines and you've got a track record of meeting deadlines, because it's essential in payroll that deadlines are met, and they want people that are capable of meeting perhaps challenging deadlines and have good work systems and workflows to get them there. So this is how you get through this question. Say each of those things on the list, discuss those, and you will have a really in-depth answer. You could talk for several minutes quite easily using this structure. So hopefully this question will be one that you'll do well on. Let's look at the next one, which is, what is your greatest weakness? And you should notice that I've underlined greatest. If they ask for a greatest weakness, you have to choose something that's actually a real weakness and something that is going to be a little bit of a problem in certain situations. And then to be successful in this, you want to start by picking an actual weakness. You can score really lowly if you pick a fake weakness. So if you say something like, I'm way too much of a perfectionist, they won't take you seriously. That suggests that you can't think about your own abilities, you don't reflect on what you're good at and what you're not good at, and it shows really a lack of an ability to critique yourself, and that's very negative. Then the next thing you need to think about is, what are you doing about it? And you have to be doing something small. If you've identified a weakness, you want to have some sort of plan of how you can start developing and removing this weakness. But the most important thing is that your weakness should be completely irrelevant to payroll. It should not be something that will have any effect on your job. So think about what you need to be successful in payroll, and don't say something like that, like you're disorganized, or perhaps I can't help myself from stealing from my employers. If you're someone that's responsible for large amounts of money and you're concerned about the fact that you might steal some of it, you're probably not going to get the job, obviously. Let's think about how you will actually answer this, and then I'll give you some inspiration of some things you can say in a payroll interview that are your weaknesses that generally people are not going to be very bothered about. So a weakness I'm aware of is, say what your weakness is. Don't talk about your weakness in great detail, just say it very briefly, and then I've been working on this by, and then say 1 or 2 things that you could do to reduce this weakness over time. And some ideas of things that you might say is, you can only speak English if you're applying to a company where you don't believe that's going to be a big barrier. If you are applying to a company that has lots of people that speak another language, then I wouldn't choose that one. But generally speaking, in the UK, for example, and in many US states, the vast majority of people applying for the job probably only speak English. So it's not going to be a huge problem. It's not a good thing. It would be great to know another language, but it's probably not going to cost you the job. Taking on too much, where you maybe find it difficult to say no, and that you tend to be really interested in taking on new projects, and you're quite enthusiastic about that. And sometimes you do take on a little bit much, and it ends up that you're working in the evenings because you've agreed to too much work, and you're going to try and manage your time a bit better and know more clearly what your capacity is. That's a fair weakness to have. And then you could talk about public speaking. It's very unlikely that when you're working in payroll, you're going to have to give a speech to 1,000 people. So if that was a weakness of yours, if you're terrified of the idea of standing on stage in front of 1,000 people and delivering a speech, you could talk about that. Not going to be a big problem in payroll. So that's a good weakness to use. Let's move on to the next question. What would you do if an employee contacted you to ask about another employee's salary? Now, you may think that this is an extremely easy question to answer, and quite often people just answer these sort of questions very simply. They just give a couple of words and they say something like no. That if you're asked to disclose another employee's salary, you just say no, which for the vast majority of cases is the right answer. And it's essential to protect confidentiality, but it doesn't show off. You maybe get the question, generally speaking, right, but you're not showing lots of knowledge and giving them confidence that you really, really know what you're doing. So let's look at how you can give a really strong answer to this, not just a basic answer. You're not competing with the people who are going to say, well, they've called, just give them it. What's the harm? Those people are not going to get the job. You're competing against people that do know the answer, and you're trying to give a better answer. So what you want to do is talk about the things that you need to know. Then reassure them that you're not going to do something stupid and be very clear about it. And then you're going to answer the question. So the first thing is you're going to say that you're going to know the company's policy. You're going to know exactly what the confidentiality policies are and how the company works with these sort of things. You're going to explain the dangers of disclosure. So, for example, if you were to tell this employee, for example, that Bob, who does exactly the same job as them, earns $3,000 more a year, that's going to cause a lot of problems. You may even lose an employee. You may end up with a lawsuit. So it's very important that you don't give away this sort of information. Then you want to be aware of your legal obligations. So there is privacy here, and you are breaching someone's privacy. People do not want their friends and their colleagues knowing how much money goes in their bank account each month. And if they don't need to know, they should not be knowing. Then you talk about the reassurance thing. So you say that you always protect confidentiality. And it's very important that confidentiality is always protected. Then you just say a very simple thing that you will always follow confidentiality policies. You won't make up your own policies. You're clear on what you need to do. Then you say that you know who is entitled to this information. The slight complexity here is there is certain employees in certain circumstances that may actually be able to ask this question and may be entitled to an answer without breaching confidentiality. So, for example, if the payroll manager were to ask you what the salary of another employee is, then the payroll manager has an interest in knowing that, and that's relevant to them carrying out their job. And as part of the payroll department, it's not unreasonable that they would be allowed to know that. So there's a slight complexity there. It's not no to absolutely everybody. There is certain employees for whom they are entitled to that information, and that's okay under the confidentiality policy. Then you answer it. So you basically say that you would refuse to disclose salaries to an employee who just immediately asks without a very, very good reason. So the idea is they work in payroll and they're authorized to have that information. If it's someone from outside payroll who has no reason why they should have that information and they are not entitled to that information, you would never, ever disclose it, ever. Then you can only do this, a disclosure of this, to an appropriate identity verified person with explicit authorization. This is not something that you will do just on your own. You would have to have explicit authorization, and that person would have to have a need to know and the right to know. And then you would, of course, verify identity. So you wouldn't send it in an email. You would only disclose salary information to someone who is entitled to it and has a good reason to have it, and they are allowed to have that information. And you must be sure that if it's, for example, the payroll manager, that you are actually speaking to the payroll manager. You're not speaking to someone pretending to be them. So that's a more nuanced and more accurate way of answering it. But the key thing is that you don't disclose salaries without authorization, and only to people who have an entitlement and are able to receive that information under the confidentiality policy. And it's essential that confidentiality with those salaries is always maintained. You are trusted with information, and you must not lose that trust. Otherwise, you'll end up losing your job. So that's how you get through that question. It's quite a complicated question when you really think about it. And so don't oversimplify it. Go through these steps. Next one. How do you keep up with changes in payroll legislation? Obviously, they would rather employ someone who's really on top of their knowledge and knows any changes and isn't going to make mistakes. So let's think about how you answer this. The first thing is you think about CPD. So that's continuing professional development. So things change, you need to develop with those. Then you want to show that you're alert to changes. And then you want to say the things that you read to go that step further. So think about any recent courses you've done, any internal training. This is, of course, if you're already in payroll. If you're not in payroll yet and this is your first job, you won't have that, but you might have qualifications. There are webinars that you can go to. So if you just type in, say, IRS webinars or HMRC webinars or your tax office, and see if they've got online training. Accountants firms often have online trainings that are free as a way of advertising. So check out some webinars, even just go on YouTube and find some. And you could talk about having watched those. Then you want to be alert. You want to see the changes as quickly as possible. So you can talk about software tools. So if you're using payroll software, they will try and keep you as up to date as possible. They will show you the new changes. There will be alerts that come through, and you can talk about how you're always conscious of those and you regularly read any of the updates that come from your software provider. Talk about being subscribed to email lists. So there is firms of accountants that may send out newsletters. There is tax offices. So the IRS, for example, have things that you can sign up with that give you bulletins. So you can be on various email lists where you will get good, high quality, reputable information sent to you as an alert. And then you can talk about what you read. Are there any really good blogs, any really good websites that give really good commentary on what's happening and analysis? Do you follow people in payroll or payroll organizations or accounting organizations that would have this information and keep you up to date? And do you read any industry publications? So look up some of the sort of magazines within your industry and resources from professional bodies and talk about how you read those. And then you'll have a really strong answer. So talk about your CPD that you've done, any of the alerts that you get, and then things that you can be reading. And I've given you a list. So search up and have 3 or 4 names ready to go, and then you will do well on this question. Let's move on to the next one, which is tell me about yourself. For many employees, this is a wasted opportunity. It's not the time to talk about your childhood and your whole life story. That's not relevant. What you need to do is show them that you have the skills and the experience that's relevant to the job and that you're going to be good at the job and that you're applying to this because this is the job that you want. That's what you want to get across. It's an opportunity to convince them to employ you, not an opportunity to just talk about yourself. And make sure you take that opportunity. And to do that, I'm going to show you how to focus your answer on the things that are important. So firstly, you're obviously going to mention your experience because they're super interested in it. They've seen your resume or your CV, so they know about it, but they don't know as much about it as you might like. If you've got great experience, you want to really show that. Then you talk about your personal qualities. Think about what is important in being good at payroll and show that you've got those. And I'll give you some inspiration of things that you could mention. And then talk about your interest in the role. So you got to think really deeply about why you've applied for payroll and why you want to have this job and your experience in the past, and talk about why you've actually decided to apply for this company, because that's a bit about yourself. That's showing your motivation. So let's start with experience. So you obviously say your recent work experience or any recent training that you've done. And you describe that not just in basic terms, you say exactly what your responsibilities were and how you contributed to the success of the firm in those answers. Then you want to focus mostly on finance and payroll. So if you have had jobs that are directly relevant, talk more about them and less about those that are less relevant, but there's still good experience there. Then you want to think about if you've ever worked in any highly regulated areas where there's very clear rules and compliance issues, and you can talk about that. So if you don't have payroll specific experience, if you've worked in somewhere that's very heavily regulated, that's good experience and very relevant. And then you want to make sure you highlight all of the qualifications that you have to show that you're a strong candidate and well qualified. Then you talk about qualities. So you could say that you're highly reliable. It's very important to be reliable in payroll, that you're diligent, that you work carefully and you don't make lots of mistakes. They don't want people that are very scatterbrained and all over the place, because mistakes cost a lot of money and it's not acceptable for payroll to be wrong. So diligent is a really good quality. Then you're professional. That's just a simple one. Say that you're very professional. If you've got business acumen, say that and be prepared to back that up. And then you can also say that you're technically competent. Now is a good time to mention if you're good at Excel. Mention any payroll software that you've used in the past. You're really good at ADP. You're really good at Sage. Talk about these and your experience. Just say simple things that you're IT literate. You're good at using a computer. You can use all of Microsoft Word. These are things that you can mention. And look at the job description. Look at the skills that they are asking for and tick off as many as you can in your answer to this. Then talk about your interest in the role. So is this the next step in your career? Why have you decided to move to this company? Why now? You may want to talk about that. Why do you apply to this company? What do you really like about this company? Why is this company a good match for you? And then if you've got experience of working in payroll, say that you really enjoy working in payroll and talk about the things that you like. Or if you're applying to your first payroll job, talk about what you think you'll enjoy about it and why you think payroll is a good match for you personally. And that's how you maximize your great opportunity where you're in control of the interview and you can present any information you want. So get through this and you'll have an excellent answer. This is one where I would recommend that you maybe write down an answer and practice it a few times. You won't memorize it. That's not what you want. You don't want to be robotic. But if you've practiced an answer a little bit, you'll be so much more confident. And if you ace this, it's going to really help your chances of getting the job. So let's move on to another one. Can you describe your skills and experience with Excel or spreadsheets? Now, I've written this question to be about Excel, but it needn't be. It could be about Microsoft Word. It could be about Microsoft Office. It could be about a particular accounting software or a payroll software. It could be any software that you may have to use, and you can answer it in the same way, just changing what the name of it is. So for Excel, you would think about all of the parts of Excel that are really important and mention all of those to show that you've got it. If you were asked about some payroll software, think about the key things that you do in a payroll and then say that you have those skills. So for Excel, you should know how to use formulae, filters, pivot tables, and to perform reconciliations to check that one thing matches up with another thing. And so you can mention these as the key skills to show, one, you know what you're talking about, and you've got the important bits covered. Then what you want to talk about is some things that really enhance your answer. So if you're not confident on Excel, you don't have anything to prove that you've got Excel skills, complete a free course. A lot of software has free courses out there, even just on YouTube, or ideally a free one where you get a certificate. So just type in a software that you think is important to know and then put in free course. And usually you can find loads of free courses. Even software providers may provide free trials and provide a course to go with it to get people trained up in that. Then for Excel or Microsoft Office, you can actually get a certificate. You may have to pay for it, but it's a really good qualification to have in your CV. And that's just a stamp that says, I am competent in this skill, and it's a bit of showing off. So let's show you how you prepare a good answer for any software question. And we'll do this one again with the Excel example. So you start by saying Excel is a very useful skill to have when working in payroll because a lot of companies do use Excel for analysis and keeping track of numbers. So it's important to have that skill. Then you start listing all of the parts of it and show that you can do the key things. So I am proficient in the fundamentals of Excel and confidently use formulae, manipulate data, use pivot tables, filter data, and analyze data. So just a list of all the important things that you can do, and you're showing that you've got the relevant skills. Then what you do is, depending on where your experience or your knowledge comes from, you could choose, option A, I developed these skills by completing a course in Excel, for which I'm happy to share my certificates. Or alternatively, if you don't have a certificate but you've got experience, you could say something like, I developed these skills while I worked in a previous role where and then just say how you used that software and how you developed those skills. And that is the perfect answer to this. So let's move on to another one, which is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And this is one where you don't want to just make it up on the spot. This is one where you have to think about where you're going in 5 years, what's your priorities, and how you're going to get there, and just have 2 or 3 bullet points you scribble down on a piece of paper and just have an answer ready to go. So let's look at what a good answer looks like and what a bad answer looks like and things you don't say. So for a good answer, ensure that it's credible. Don't say something that looks ridiculous or silly. Make sure it's reasonable. Then have a simple plan. So just think about how you get there. And I'm going to give you some suggestions of some things that you can say. Think about training, development, and new skills. So what are you going to learn? How is this job going to make you better? And if you're looking at promotion or just being really great at your job, you want to talk about the training program that you'll get when you join the company, perhaps, and the skills that you're going to develop. Are you going to learn a new software? Are you going to get better at it? And then you're going to link this to payroll. So when you move from one company to another, you're going to be working with new people and you'll pick up new skills and learn new ways of working from the experienced team that this company has. So things that you might want to talk about is plan to, one up. In 5 years, you'd like to take on more responsibility. Once you've earned that and once you've developed to that point, you may look at being a payroll manager, for example, something that is reasonable but not ridiculous. And you got to think about the size of the company. In a very big company, there's probably going to be more opportunities to move up, and you can say things like you plan to grow with the company. Think about CPD. You could also, on the flip side, if you don't want to move one level up, that's fine. In that case, talk about being really outstanding at your job. So in 5 years, you want to be someone who is considered someone that is extremely experienced and extremely knowledgeable and highly expert and the go-to person within that company for any problems or advice. And you may also say something like you'd be really interested in mentoring and developing other staff members once you have built a strong reputation of reliability and that you're seen as someone who is highly expert in this area. So there's the moving up, where you talk about skills, development, and how you're going to earn one level higher. And then there's a flip side, if you want to stay in the same role, but being really brilliant at that role and maybe contributing a little bit more, but still within your role. On the flip side, anything that sounds really silly, don't say. It just upsets people and makes you look, silly. And then don't upset or insult the interviewer. So think about who is interviewing you and don't talk about being their boss in the interview or taking their job. That's something that's not going to go down very well. So if you're saying in 5 years' time, I'm going to be your boss, that's very negative and it upsets people. And then just think about things that are relevant to the company. So don't talk about in 5 years' time, you're looking to relocate to another country. Or in 5 years' time, you're going to do something that's completely different. And if you give the idea that you're going to be quitting payroll, that's probably going to blow the whole interview. The time to talk about leaving a company isn't the interview to get the job. So don't go down that road. Focus on what's on the good arrow. Don't say the things on the bad arrow, and give the idea that you want to work in payroll long term. And that's part of your 5-year plan. Otherwise, you're not going to score very, very well on the question. So let's move on to another question. So what do you know about our company? And it's very likely that they will expect some knowledge of the company. And also, if you're applying to work for the company, you should know about it. So what I always recommend is that you have a fact file ready for your company. I'm going to just give you a simple list of things that you can look up to prepare a good answer. So I would recommend that you either screenshot this page or take a note of it and then just work through it. So I have one sentence on what it does and just memorize that one sentence that says very clearly, this is the company's business. Then think about what makes it stand out. If it was the payroll department within a supermarket, talk about how they offer very competitive prices. Or if you're applying to someone at the premium end, talk about how they offer very high quality products that are loved by millions of people. Something like that that makes the company a bit special. What's the competitive advantages? Then obviously you're working in payroll, so the number of employees is going to be a very important factor. So just learn how many employees they have roughly, and that's easy to find out. Know the date when the company was founded. Very easy to remember, and it's a good fact. I'd recommend that you just type in the company name and then put annual report. If it's listed on a stock exchange or a very large company, you will be able to find an annual report. You might not be able to, but you could look at the Wikipedia page or read the About Us page. And then once you've read those, just pick out 3 interesting facts, things that stand out to you, and then those could be 3 simple facts that you talk about to show that you've done some research and you know your company. So take a little bit of time. It should only take half an hour, and then you can basically get through this question confidently because you've got the fundamentals. They're not looking at you being an expert in the company, you're just about to join it, but they want to be reassured that you've done some research and you know the basics. And this fact file, if you do it, it will make you fly through this question. Before we finish, I want to do a bonus, which is some great questions you can ask at the end of your payroll interview. So one question you should always be thinking about asking is, could you tell me the next steps in the hiring process at your company? Show you're really interested in getting the job. And you may actually say, I'm really interested in this position, and so I'm eager to find out what the next steps in the hiring process are, to show that you're really interested in the job. And also, you probably do want to know this anyway. You want to know when you're going to find out. And this is a nice way of asking that. You may show an interest in your team and want to know about that team and how it works. So you could ask, can you tell me more about the team that you have in your payroll department? And show a real genuine interest in your colleagues. You could ask a good question about what CPD and training opportunities does your company provide to support the development of your staff. Show that you're really interested in getting better, that you're really interested in keeping up to date with all of the changes in payroll, and you want to be trained up to the highest level to be brilliant at your job. And that's what that question shows. You may also want to ask, what could a new hire do to prepare for starting in your payroll department, and then put at the end, if successful at interview, because you may or may not be successful. You don't want to just come across arrogant and suggest that you've already got the job, so you add that at the end. And what they may suggest is that you should look at this, you should read this, and you can make a commitment there and then that you're going to do that preparation, which makes you stand out as someone who cares about being prepared, cares about being good at their job, and actually is going to start one step ahead of some other one that they could hire. And then lastly, try and just make up one question on the day to make it a bit more free-flowing and to be referencing something that came up in the past. So I hope this was helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck in your payroll interview. I'd appreciate if you could post in the comments what questions you were asked in your interview, and also like and subscribe. And finally, thank you very much for watching.